Here at Spoonful of Strength, we want to make this podcast interactive. We want to hear your stories and we want you involved in our conversations. Follow Spoonful of Strength on Instagram, where we will post questions throughout the week. Your answers may be shared on our podcast. Do you have a story to share? Send us a message on Spoonful of Strength on Instagram with your health journey, and we may interview you on this show. Welcome to Spoonful of Strength, a podcast for people with chronic illness and the ones who love them, where we talk all things chronic. Here's your host, Rachel and Tina.
Welcome to Spoonful of Strength. Today's episode, we're talking about being a caregiver to someone with chronic illness. We will be interviewing someone that we both mention quite often is my brother and Rachel's husband, Ed Hayden. And he'll share with us about what it's been like being a caregiver for both of your from your diabetes through MS, and we're happy to have them join us.
Yeah. How's your week been?
So far, I cannot complain.
Well, that's good.
How about you?
I've had a frustrating week. I had an appointment with my pulmonologist this past week. And do you ever have those doctor's appointments where you go in just expecting it to be a regular appointment? You don't even think too much about it. And you just kind of walk in and you think, oh, this is going to be easy, in and out, and I'm good for another 6 months. Well, come to find out, I have been diagnosed with something under the umbrella of COPD and asthma. So I've never smoked a day in my life. And so that hit me a little hard. Have you ever had a doctor's appointment where you were so unprepared that, like, I left there and he asked, do you have any questions? I didn't ask one question. And now I've got all these questions that I need to ask that now I'm going to probably have to message him. But do you ever find yourself in that situation where you're just so unprepared?
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. You're going in and you're not expecting that in the slightest. Definitely.
Yeah. So that one's been hard. So I've got some nebulizing treatments and possibly inhalers and things like that. And so that hit me a little bit hard on Friday, but I'm looking forward to turning that around and having a better week this week. So,
all you can do the best you can do.
Yep. Is just take it one step at a time and, get my questions answered. And, hopefully that will give me some sense of, just peace with it, and knowledge is power. So the more I know about the disease, then the more I can kind of be prepared on how that will affect, everything else. So
is this still related to, or possibly underlyingly related to MS, or is it,
I was curious because I have weakness, not in my lungs. My lungs have always been fine up until now. But the muscle weakness is the muscles that are surrounding the lungs. So they're not like supporting the lungs real well. So that is one thing that I think I got answered. And it was that it probably has nothing to do with the muscle weakness. So, it's because I think it's like inflammation of the bronchial tubes. And so it's more along the lines of inflammation. So I guess that could potentially have something to do with MS. But again, I didn't ask the right questions. I wasn't prepared. So that'll be all things that I'll be hopefully finding out this week. So,
well, and they may not even know if there is the correlation there or not. That's
my favorite saying is, I am a quote unquote complicated patient. Not that I'm like complicated in that I'm, hard to deal with, but my case is complicated. So
things,
so we'll see.
Things don't necessarily tie all together, but
yeah, exactly. So Well, let's bring this man in now.
Alrighty.
I've talked about him a little bit on the podcast before, and he's agreed to let us send some questions his way on being a caregiver. And so we're going to bring him in. Hello, honey.
Nice. Hello.
So, this is my husband, Ed. I'm going to let him introduce himself and just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started grilling you.
Okay, sounds fair enough. I am Ed. I am Rachel's husband and your other favorite co-host, Tina's brother. So I'm very well acquainted with the pair here that have done a great job, I think, of what they put together. So
Thank you.
A little bit about myself. I feel like I grew up in a normal family. Childhood was good. We weren't really exposed to any kind of chronic illness early on. Our father ended up having lung cancer later on in life, had a lung removed. So kind of a little bit of experience with a chronic illness with a family member at that point. But at the age that I was at, I don't think I really truly understood what it was or, what a person goes through when they're in something like that. I went into the military right out of high school. So I have a military background, spent 25 years working in law enforcement. My personal feelings and getting into law enforcement, I think, was just the sense of liking to help people. How we met.
How did you meet me? How did you get the lovely chance and the opportunity to meet me?
There is two actual meetings that took place here. So,
oh yes, we have to talk about the first time we met.
So Tina was a manager at a video store. This is going to date ourselves because, a video store.
VHS, by the way.
Yeah. So she was a manager at a store, and Rachel worked for the company. She was a manager at another store, I believe. So she just happened to be over at Tina's store one day when I stopped by to see Tina, just to chat, see how she was doing. And Rachel was there, and I thought, man, this girl's kind of goofy. And just listening to her talk and the way she was acting, and she's kind of goofy. And then she had a big box of probably VHS tapes that she wanted to load into her car, which her car at the time was a Sunfire. So the opening to the trunk space was very small, but she was determined to lift up this big box and put it in her car all on her own, which I believe I offered to help.
I don't remember that, but it's okay.
I think I did offer to help, but Rachel refused my help. And that actually was going to come back later in life.
It's foreshadowing.
Yes, foreshadowing her personality, which I didn't know at the time. I just thought, like I said, she was a goofy person. So first time we met, I was actually at this store, and I offered to help put this box in her car. She turned it down, and that was it. So we were deciding later on, to put together a co-ed softball team. So we were looking for players, and we pretty much were going to take anybody we could get. So
thanks a lot. Appreciate that one.
So unbeknownst to me, though, Tina asked Rachel if she wanted to play softball. And I guess the story goes that Rachel was not an athlete, but for some reason she said she would agree to play. So we actually met putting together this co-ed softball team. I was the coach. So Rachel needed a lot of practice. So I offered my time to private lessons, which were totally private softball lessons.
He had other things on his mind. He was, not just helping out a poor player who doesn't know which end of the bat goes up, but
never.
Or which side of the field is left and right.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
it's difficult, okay, to know which side of the baseball field is left or right.
I believe the question was she wanted to go out into the field and she wanted to go where most of the balls are not hit to. And
Yep.
we told her right field. Well, she proceeds to go on to left field. And then halfway through the practice, she's like, I thought you said right field didn't get very many balls hit to it.
Because every ball came to me.
And we said, they don't. You're in left field. And that's why she was getting all these balls hit to her. So.
Okay. So then you fell in love. We got married and all of that.
Yeah.
This podcast is not about me. But
A little bit.
yeah, unfortunately it has to be a little bit, but
yes,
but sorry.
So that's the meeting part. That's how we met. Like I said, we actually met twice, but it was the second time where it became a long-term.
The long-term one. Yeah. Right before you met, I believe, was when Rachel was initially diagnosed with diabetes. So were you concerned? Did you have any doubts or concerns about getting into a relationship with somebody that had a lifelong chronic illness that may impact your life?
I was not exposed really to a person with. I'd heard of diabetes, so I knew what it was, but I didn't know really what it entailed to a person who actually had it. I didn't really have a lot of experience, I guess, with somebody with diabetes. So I was never really concerned. Even if I fully understood, I think what a diabetic person has to go through. Somebody who has diabetes, you can't be like, let that be a deal breaker. It never really played into my wanting to date and then eventually marry her.
So I was actually diagnosed with MS 15 years into our marriage. Although we went on a 5-year ride of trying to figure out what it was before it was actually diagnosed. So what was it like for you as a caregiver, but also as a spouse, to go through that period of time where we kind of knew something was wrong? We weren't getting anywhere with the doctors. It was kind of like a wait and see pattern. How did that affect you and being, my husband and my caregiver?
I think in that period of time, you're not really looking at yourself as a caregiver because you're not sure really what's going on. So you don't know what care you're giving, I guess. It was a waiting game. It's tough. Basically, emotional support was the best thing I could offer. She knew something was wrong, and doctors kept telling her, "Oh, it's just your diabetes," but that was pretty much under control. I remember going into a doctor's appointment once where, for some reason, we were 99.9% sure that the MS doctor this was the day that he was going to confirm the diagnosis, which, I mean, we already knew something was wrong. We already knew how she felt and what she was going through. So putting a name on it wasn't necessarily going to change how she felt. But I guess it would give some credence to it. And then that day that we went to that appointment, he said, "Oh, I'm just still not quite ready to say that this is MS." And I think that was a little bit of a shock to both of us, I think, because we were pretty sure it was coming. But again, it doesn't change the fact, whether you put a name on it, put a label on it, it doesn't change the fact that you have something. So I guess that you're just trying to gather as much information, learn as much as you can. It's brand new. You don't know the full scope of what you're getting ready to head into. So it's kind of a support role at that point for me.
Yeah, I don't think we had any idea what was coming.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
That's tough. And it's also, it's tough going in thinking that, okay, we're finally going to get some answers. And they're like, no, you're not.
Yeah. That it was a bit of a psychological setback, I think, but
Yeah.
Did you know Spoonful of Strength is not just a podcast?
We have an Instagram page called Spoonful of Strength where you can see clips of our upcoming episodes, learn about different illnesses, and we share other people's stories. We also have an Etsy shop where you can shop for clothing such as t-shirts and sweatshirts and hoodies. You can find candles and mugs and tumblers and blankets. You can find it all. We support all chronic illnesses, and the great thing is, if you find a t-shirt in our shop for multiple sclerosis, we can change that for lupus or Ehlers-Danlos or any other illness that you need. Everything is customizable in our shop. Use the code podcast for 20% off your entire order.
So many people, Rachel included, that I know she's shared a little bit, they struggle mentally with coping with their right after their diagnosis and looking for the future. Can you talk a little bit about those years initially, as Rachel may have struggled with that emotional and mental aspect of it, and how that impacted your life as her husband and as her caregiver?
Sure, that would probably, I would have to say, would be the darkest days of the whole journey.
Yeah.
It's when somebody can no longer do things that Rachel was a go-getter. There's no doubt about that. I mean, she balanced 100 different things and did it all very well. So for her to start noticing that she can't keep that pace anymore, and then knowing that she has to change her lifestyle, that became a tough pill to swallow for both of us. So at that point, you can't. I mean, I guess you could, as a married couple, you could walk away, but it would be an option.
Yeah.
And
I think I gave you that option many times because I felt so much guilt about being a burden.
Right. And that's a good point, is that a person who is afflicted feels like they've become a burden. So all you can do is work harder to convince them they're not a burden, to do what you have to do. You don't ask for a disability. It brings on a lot of changes. I think mentally, part of that for me, we went to our first MS walk
2017,
yeah. And that was a very sobering experience because we saw the level of how bad people were afflicted. I mean, you saw people that looked perfectly normal. You wouldn't even know they had MS. And Rachel was kind of borderline right there, I think. Looking at her, again, she was having the struggles with fatigue and things like that, but she was still pretty functioning. And we also saw people that were in wheelchairs. We saw people that were not knowing a lot about MS and seeing that for the first time. You're like, whoa, this can be a pretty devastating thing. So, a mental challenge, definitely.
Yeah. And I think that's where Ed said the darkest time. I think there was just battles going on between me trying to accept that I couldn't work, being a mom, feeling guilty financially, feeling as if, I wasn't good enough. And so I was having my own mental issues. And then, so I believe I was pushing him away and, giving him the option of getting out because I felt bad. We married for sickness and in health, but he didn't. I remember saying multiple times in therapy, he didn't sign up for this. He did not sign up for having to take care of me and dealing with the emotional part. And that wasn't fair to him. And I give him so much praise for sticking it out because I know I didn't treat him probably right because I was battling so many other emotions, and we stuck through it. And I've said on the podcast before, would you say this is probably, I mean, we are in a really good place, and have been for the last few years. So,
I'd agree.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree. And
So
to
you
go
feel like
back
it
to the
made you,
beginning of that, Rachel had a very good therapist,
Yes.
and he was very good. And he used to tell her all the time, would he be here if he didn't care?
I think that that's not an abnormal reaction, Rachel, for you. I know a friend of mine also had gone through cancer, and he had told me how he just was purposely trying to like make his wife angry and not want to be with him because he's like, I figured that if I made her hate me, then she won't miss me if I don't make it. And
Yeah.
so
And
that
that's
was
a
something that they, yeah,
crazy
yeah,
thought process. But I think that's how
I
people really
yeah,
think.
yeah,
I think it was more of my struggle with myself, feeling like I wasn't worthy and
yeah.
good enough to accept the love he was giving me, and that I felt so horrible about him having to change his life because of me. And I took all that guilt and all of that, and as I struggled to do things, it got even worse. So if I couldn't put dinner on the table because I was exhausted. I was like, what kind of a mother am I? What kind of a person am I that I can't put food on the table? And all of those things. So it was a lot about just my mental state and just feeling like I love him so much that I don't want him to have to go through this. He doesn't deserve to have to go through this. Obviously, we're talking about all things emotions. So, how did you cope in those times? How did you cope with the emotional stress of caregiving? Because I feel like we're in a place now that we're able to work through things, and I'm in a better space positively. But in those times, being my caregiver, what sort of toll did that take on you?
It may seem like a strange answer, but working, like going to do your job, where you go to work and you do your job and you kind of put that out of your mind. What's going on at home helps you get through it. But also just taking time for yourself, having hobbies. You have to, sometimes you do have to step out of it, and you might think you feel like a horrible person because you're thinking, well, I can step out of it, but Rachel's stuck with this the rest of her life. But it's just, again, take time for yourself. If you've got hobbies, immerse yourself in the hobbies. I know some people, if you have the opportunity and you need it, you can get into a support group. For caregivers, they have that. People like to talk about themselves. They like to be with others that are feeling the same or experiencing the same things that they are, or having a hobby like collecting baseball cards.
Yes.
Or just something you enjoy that you can do outside of your normal. And the term caregiver can also, it's, to me, it's more of a supporting role. Caregiver, sometimes you might get this connotation that it means, oh, you got to help them out of the bed, you got to dress them, you got to do everything for them, which some people get to that point, and we may get to that point, I don't know. But just that support, always being able to be there, even if you're under the stress yourself. Just sometimes you got to pack it away and offer the best support that you can give, because again, you have to remember, I can step out of it, Rachel, or whoever, the afflicted, the disabled person cannot step away from their disability.
So you talked about going through the two of you also went through therapy together as you were struggling relationship wise as early on with that, all the changes. What is one thing that you felt like you learned in counseling about your relationship and being a caregiver for Rachel?
He is really, really good at what he does, and what he I think, focused on it with me and knew that I was the type of person, and a lot of guys are, they want to fix everything. Okay, Rachel's got MS, so I want to fix it. Let me invent a cure for MS and give her the shot, and she'll be great. No problem. But you can't do that. So now you kind of have a different role of the fixer, to where you have to be, again, the support person. You have to comfort. You have to listen. When she's having a bad day and she comes to you and she says this, and that, she doesn't want you to fix it because she knows it can't be fixed. She just wants you to listen to her, understand her, do what you can do, and just continue to offer that support, emotionally, mentally, whatever you can do.
Tell us about a time when you were like really overwhelmed, either overwhelmed with the situation of the disease, or you felt helpless, and how, as a caregiver, seeing your loved one going through a particularly hard time, what was there a time where you felt really overwhelmed?
Situations I know where you've been hospitalized or you've gone to the ER and you're going to be there for, I don't know, 8 hours, whatever it was, 10 hours. The having pets, especially, and kids, the household still has to be ran. So I would still have to do the things that needed to be done while still trying to attend to Rachel being either in the hospital or in the ER, or even maybe, at home, where she is in a position where she's got to lay down or something. It can be a struggle at times, but again, personally, I just do it. You do what you need to do. You get it done. You can't fault or blame the other person. It's not their fault. They didn't ask for this again. So it can be overwhelming, but you just do it. You get through it. It would absolutely do no good to be like, well, gosh, can't you just help out a little bit? Something like that. I would never say that. Those thoughts never even crossed my mind, which we've had that discussion as well, when she has said things to me that, like, thoughts like that it would just never cross my mind, that I would blame her or make her think that she needs to get up and cook dinner or clean the house or do something like that. I don't think that way. I just don't.
What do you feel has been the hardest part to see, the physical changes or the cognitive changes?
At this point in the progression, I would have to say the physical changes, only because the cognitive is definitely there. And there are times where I do worry sometimes when she's in that cognitive fog, I guess you would call it, and she's out on her own doing, running errands or something like that. If we're just sitting around having a conversation, or I overhear her having conversations with other people, there are a lot of times where I know she grasps for words. She can't complete a sentence, and that's not, I hate to say, horrible thing. I mean, it's bad. It's frustrating for her, I know for a fact. But physically, the physical changes our lifestyle because of the things that we used to do. We used to, the horseback riding or going hiking on some trails at a park. And even a simple thing like walking through a grocery store, that became an issue, became a problem. So I think it definitely has been harder physically.
Well, we had to change our life. We had to buy a new house because we didn't want to be stuck in a 2-story house. And so that was a major change that we had to make. And I think that lately, physically, the physical part is getting worse quicker than we're ready for. Would you agree?
I would agree. And I mean, only God knows what's coming down the road for us, but we just we deal with what we with as it comes. And again, cognitive issues could get worse. I don't know. One day I walk in the door and she's like, "Oh, who are you?"
I'm going to do that tomorrow that'll be funny.
I don't see that coming, but I don't see that as being a bigger issue than a physical challenge right now.
Battling a chronic illness is hard. Some days you cry and some days you just want to laugh. If you're looking for a lighthearted gift for someone with a chronic illness, look no further. Spoonful of Strength on Etsy has candles like Smells Better Than the Crap You've Been Dealt in clean cotton. Or how about My Last Nerve? Oh, look, it's on fire in apple harvest scent. Find great gifts at Spoonful of Strength on Etsy. That's Spoonful with 2 L's. Use code podcast for 20% off. Let me ask you this. And our therapist has advised us many times to talk about this. But do you think about the future and the possibility of my illness progressing and potentially needing more help? That's been a very scary conversation that we've avoided many times, is talking about what the future looks like. So do you think a lot about the future and what that could potentially mean?
Well, let me start that out with the therapist. He scolded us many times.
Yes, yes.
Because we did avoid any kind of future talk.
But it's important.
It is important. I mean, you can take life one day at a time. I know people, you just can only go one day at a time, which is partially true. But you also have to know what you're going to do when that curveball comes. So just recently, actually, we've kind of have touched on some fun future, what things can look like in the future. We've already made some changes, I think, in our lifestyle, obviously. One of the biggest challenges I think I've always faced is when do I step in? Like if I see she needs to do something or wants to do something, and I know it's a struggle for her, I could do it.
Can you give us an example?
Boy, put me on the spot with an example.
Like, are you more scared about me being away from you and the cognitive issues, or are you more worried about the decline in the physical part? Because I am stubborn, and I don't. We didn't have to say very, but
well, okay. I'll leave the word very. It's stubborn.
No, I am. Okay. I am stubborn, and I have a hard time admitting changes.
Yeah. Let me give an example.
Okay, give me an example, honey.
Somewhat recently, a month or so ago, she decided she's taking on the project of remulching our front area at our front porch. So that involved, of course, buying, I don't know, 15, 20 bags of mulch.
Yeah.
That the old mulch had to be raked out. The new mulch had to be poured in. Okay. Not an easy task for her, but she's going to do it. By God, she's going to do it. And I offer my help, and she refuses it because that's the way she is. So I have to, again, it's to me, and it happens a lot. There's that fine line between, do I let her do what she wants to do and then fail and say, I told you so? No, I would.
No, you would never say that.
I would not. But stepping in, and I think I've done this a little more recently now, where I step in and I say, I'll do it. You can't do it. I'm sorry. You just need to sit down and whatever. I didn't know that placed yet.
Yeah.
So
you do that a lot when we go to the grocery store. If we only need usually when we go to the grocery store, I use my mobility scooter, and sometimes I'll say, oh, I'm good. We don't need to, because I feel bad. It's heavy. It's big. He's got to get it out of the back of the car. And so I'll say, no, don't worry about it. I'll be fine. And he's gotten to the point now where he's like,
I don't listen because
He
it's
doesn't
not
listen.
true. She won't be fine. so,
Right.
so rather than go all the way in the store and have her go in about 20 yards and say she can't do it, and then I got to go back out and get the scooter. From
Yeah.
now on, I just say, let's get the scooter.
Let's
I'm
just
Yeah.
get
just
it.
running in for something. No. So those are just changes that I've had to learn to be a little more assertive, I guess. It's a learning process, and I think we've gotten better.
Yeah, I think
better with it.
it since my mental health has been better, it actually makes me feel good for him to kind of step up and say, I'm doing this and you're going to do this, because I know that he's looking out for my health, and he's looking out for, trying to be protective of me and my spoons and all that and all of that. So that is something that, yeah, I think it's just communication that, he's got to tell me what he's concerned about with my health and be a little bit more assertive. And I have to be able to say, I want to do this. I can't do this. Will you help me? And be not so stubborn on the things that I want to do. So it's all about communication. I think that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, communication and adapting, just to understand that there's changes that are coming and you have to adapt to them and be willing to adapt.
I always call it the new normal, adjust, and it's like when you're dealing with a lifelong chronic illness, then you're constantly going to have a new normal to adjust to.
Yeah, that's we've experienced that too, where she starts going through something that is different than what she's been going through, and then we discuss that, is this going to be the new normal, and how are you going to approach, how are we going to approach it? My scariest part is thinking that I have to be solid, that I can't be allowed to get sick. I can't face something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And that worries me as well, because I know he doesn't take care of himself as much as he should, because he's worried about me. That's a big one.
Yes, that's probably the scariest, to make sure that I'm here for her.
Do you ever see a time where I'm not here for you?
We don't look to the future. What's wrong with you?
No, I'm just teasing.
I mean, that's people don't want to face that. People don't want to talk about that. There is going to come a day where one of us is not here for the other.
Yeah.
We hope it's what am I, 45, 46?
Yeah. add a couple more years, honey.
So, I mean, we hope it's a long way down the road, and life's going to be different, either better, worse, or the same. I don't know, but there will come that day where one of us isn't here, and that's I don't think you can ever really totally prepare yourself for that.
So as we kind of wrap up this episode, I'm going to ask that you give our listeners one piece of advice that you would give to a caregiver who is struggling with being in that role, and one piece of advice to our Spoonies of what they can do to help the caregiver in their life.
My advice to somebody as a caregiver would be just to remember the PU method.
What's the PU method? Okay, this is new to me. Okay, what is the PU?
The PU method.
I've heard the FU method, but
it doesn't stink.
Which is also a good one.
Yeah.
Patience and understanding. You have to develop patience, and you have to have an understanding that the other person this is not their fault. They didn't ask for the disability. So you have to develop the patience. You have to understand where they're coming from, and just go from there. Again, it's acceptance of the way your life is, but you choose to be here, and that's the main thing. And to answer the second part of that question is, and it's funny, I know both of you have talked about it here a little bit, that the disabled person, the affected person, starts that mindset that I need to push this other person away because they don't deserve it. So you got to understand that they are there for you. So use them. Don't be afraid to ask for their help. and trust that they are there for you. That's the true test of a marriage and the loyalty to one another. So
Yeah.
that's it.
He's a good one. He stuck with me we're going to celebrate our 24th anniversary. And, I will say, I'm sure a lot of people have marital issues. I think, what did we read? That 75% of marriages where one has a chronic illness and in divorce.
Yeah, I believe it was
And I
high.
think that because there is so much stress, I mean, your world is flipped upside down and you really have to, some people can connect and get through it. And some people, it's too much. And we just got lucky that I was able to work on my mental health and that Ed was strong enough to get through that with me. I hope that everybody out there has an Ed that will stick with them through the fire. And I know that going forward that, I've got somebody on my side, for the rest of my life. So, thank you, honey.
And I think that's a big key though, is to help the other, to help you in a mental state that that I have your back.
He has my back.
So
yes, baby got back and he's got it.
Have you, Rachel, over time, I have a quick question for you though. Have you over time feel like now you're actually, I wouldn't necessarily say that it was a lack of trust in that he was going to stick around, but like, are you more comfortable with the relationship and his role as a caregiver versus feeling like, like, oh gosh, this is too much for me to ask for him.
And I think
past the point of feeling like you need to push him away because you're putting too much of a burden on him.
Yeah, I really, I think the difference is, when we were in counseling, he would say, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here, but I couldn't accept it in that point. And I didn't believe him, who would want to deal with this? Like, I have to, I don't have a choice, but he didn't sign up for this. And I don't want him to constantly have to take care of all of these things. And so I think back then it was a struggle within myself that I couldn't accept his help because I felt the burden too much. Whereas now, and it's funny because back then I wasn't as disabled as I am now. I mean, there are a lot of things that I could do back then that I can't do anymore. So it's kind of funny that the level of disability was lower back then, where I ask him to help me more and I ask for help with a lot more things and I can't do a lot of things. And he's learned to read my body language and he knows when he comes home from work, he can look at me and he knows by either my voice on the telephone or when he walks in that door, he knows what kind of day I've had. And I think now I just trust that he would rather help me than see me suffer and do it myself. And so it doesn't hurt as much mentally to ask for the help because I'm in a state now where I understand that this is not something that I've done to him, that this has happened to us and that we're in it together. And when there are times where he needs me, that I'm there as well for him.
Well said.
Well, we hope that that gave you a little bit more information, at least from our perspective of caregiving. And we thank you, honey, for being on the show and helping us out. And our next episode is going to be on Thursday, where we will interview another Spoonie that will be able to share their story. And we ask that if you have a story to share about your chronic illness, that you reach out to us on Instagram at Spoonful of Strength. Can you say, Tina, we've just been amazed at the people that we've talked to. It's
Oh, I
just
know.
been,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
it
A
has
lot of
been
very,
just
very strong,
heartwarming.
inspiring people.
Yes, and all women. We've got an interview coming up in a couple weeks with a gentleman that I'm really excited to meet. But we've been interviewing some really strong women and are interested in hearing a little bit more from you all out there. So catch up with us on Thursday, and we hope your week is great. Take care. Bye.